Today, I'm here with my team and I to discuss unlocking your upgrade. So, we're going to discuss different ways of structuring your transaction for when you want to sell your home and buy a home at the same time. My role in all of this is to help guide you through the process. I can answer general questions, obviously, things that are on the legal side or the nitty gritty finances side. That's what I have our team for. So I'm also a resource to help connect you to these resources, structuring your transaction for when you want to sell your home and buy a home at the same time. So my role in all of this is to help guide you through the process. I can answer general questions, obviously things that are on the legal side or the nitty gritty finances side. That's what I have our team for. So I'm also a resource to help connect you to these resources. Without further ado, I will go ahead and let the team introduce themselves.
Hey, Danielle Lazita, real estate attorney. I'm here to assist with the attorney review through to closing and anything that might pop up in between. I work hand in hand with realtor as well as the lender.
And I'm Pinky Shah. I'm a certified mortgage planning specialist, and our goal is to be able to help you make informed, educated decisions so that you feel good and have no remorse about the decisions that you make now, and that you go on to grow your generational wealth using real estate as one of those tools.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And that's a really important factor. With the uncertainty that the current market presents, you definitely want to be comfortable and you want to arm yourself with as much information as possible so you can feel confident in your decision making.
Ordinarily, when a seller signs a contract, they're expected to sell their home. They don't necessarily have the opportunity to say, wait, I haven't found something that I want to purchase. I'm not going to sell. Unless you work in one of two contingencies. And there's a contingency called the use and occupancy. Basically, sellers renting back from the person that they just sold their home to, either at a cost, at no cost, for a finite period of time. There's money held in escrow to ensure there's no damages to the property. It's a pretty routine part of the deal. Those are more favored than the other alternative. And the other alternative is a relocation contingency. Relocation contingencies get very difficult because you're essentially saying to your buyer, if I don't find a place to go to, if I don't find a home to purchase, I'm not going to sell my property to you. Now, it's very difficult to expect your buyer to proceed with a home inspection, order title, incur expenses, and then, you could turn around 45 days from now and say, guess what? I haven't found something I like. I was looking for a $300,000 home on the ocean in New Jersey, realistic expectations. The relocation contingency is really reserved for situations where the buyer has the stomach for it, for lack of a better word, and the seller really is in desperate need of it. The more favored option, as you can tell, is the use and occupancy. So that's, a way that a seller can avoid having to face homelessness, but it is finite. There is an end date and there's a vacate date. So if the purchase falls through, you have to, be prepared to pivot and make other plans.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that you mentioned the part about the escrow because that's one of the biggest questions I get when presenting these options to buyers or sellers is that, what if the seller damages the home? I wasn't ready to become a landlord. So that's exactly it. We hold the escrow for that.
Yeah, and the agreement, the standard use and occupancy agreement specifies that the relationship is not a landlord-tenant relationship. So, the parties don't need to worry about being a landlord or a tenant. It's more of a licensee type situation.
And I guess if we look at it from the financing side of it, the question always comes up, should I buy, should I sell first? Also, from a financing perspective, can I qualify to own both? What should I do? So there's a few different ways to do that, right? And so again, the contingency part of it, there's from a pure just numbers perspective, it's nice to be rid of one liability and on to the next, right? So sell one and then buy one. And so if you were to do that and you needed to sell in order to buy, that would make your offer contingent on the sale of a home as a seller and as a buyer, right? So if you're the seller and you're looking to go buy something, that's the other piece of this equation. What do you do and how do you structure the purchase of it? So if it is contingent on the sale of you being able to sell it because either you need it to qualify from a debt to income ratio perspective, or maybe you need the money from the sale of it to put into the down payment of it. If that's the case, then your purchase would end up becoming contingent which then imagine you're the seller of that home. Well, you're less likely to want that offer that's contingent on you selling, right? So it is possible, but you have to find the right seller who's willing to accept that. And to avoid that, right, you could do not to avoid entirely, but you could do like a same day sale and purchase, right? Where you do the sale in the morning, the purchase in the afternoon. But again, a whole lot of people have to be in jive and have to be in tune to make that work. And in a market where there's a lot of competition, it's a really difficult thing to execute. Would you ladies agree on that?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that gets even messy just with the movers, you know, the mover schedule. If the closing doesn't happen on time, if it's a day later, it becomes a really big mess. So I think the use and occupancy, like Danielle said, is more favored, especially because it gives you some time to move into the new home before you're
Yeah.
closing on your sale.
Right.
And a use and occupancy also affords the party utilizing it greater leverage in terms of potential walkthrough issues that may arise. For example, you know, let's say someone is selling their home and they've got a 30-day use and occupancy, and now they discover a significant walkthrough issue on the home that they're buying. Now they've got the leverage to, you know, coordinate and negotiate how they're going to resolve that walkthrough issue, as opposed to same day buy and sell. You sell, your stuff is on a moving truck, you discover a walkthrough issue on the home that you're buying, and your seller says, I'm not doing anything. Now you have to make the hard decision of what's more important, you know, keeping your stuff on a truck overnight, incurring the cost of that, or just dealing with a walkthrough issue. So a use and occupancy also affords protection as well in situations like that.
Right. And then there's a few other ideas to consider from if we look at it again from the financing, you could just sell after you buy your new home, assuming your finances allow you to do so, right? That's another option, is just buy first and then sell the home afterwards, because that's another option as well. Again, if your finances allow that to be the case. And then I've seen some folks who will sell their home first. And maybe if they have some family that's really generous that they can stay with for a little bit, that's also an option that we've seen happen, right? Yeah. And then there's, ways to qualify to buy without having to sell first. So there's a couple different strategies when it comes to that. One is like, maybe you're not going to sell, right? Maybe you don't want to sell and you want to convert that into a rental property. Well, we can use that as income to qualify you for the new one. And that would be assuming you don't need the money from the sale of the house, the equity of that other home, in order to put for down payment. That might be something that you can consider in that case. And then there's two other options, right? There's something called a bridge loan, which helps bridge the gap so that you don't have to be homeless. And it helps you qualify so you can be in your home, comfortably move into the new home, and then sell your old home. And then there's also a way to show up as a cash buyer on the new one. Again, there's a different program called a power buyer program, right? That allows you to continue to own your home and then buy the new one prior to selling the old one, so that you can still show up as a strong buyer to the seller, and to the home, for the home that you're buying, and then deal with that afterwards. Though the bridge loan and this, cash buyer option, they're convenience options, so they will cost you more money at the end of the day. So just keep that in mind, right? They're not things that you do if we're trying to be really frugal. But if convenience is of utmost importance, and maybe you've got a family, maybe you've got some elderly parents, reasons that make it really hard to do both and to navigate it, and you just really need the convenience, but you need that next home, that would be options to consider in that case.
Those are some really awesome options. And to add to that point, sometimes what I find people end up having to do is, when they're competing against multiple offers, in order to entice a seller to accept an offer with the home sale contingency, they're often having to sweeten the pot with price. So, depending on how much that costs versus how much over you're spending on your purchase price, it may make more sense to go with these convenience options, because they may end up saving you money from, sweetening the pot, so to speak.
Yeah. And get you in faster too, by the way, right? Because it's just, if you show up as if you can get your offer accepted faster, this whole process can just go faster for you. And the stress of it all is eliminated, and you get what you want in a quicker time period.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And on that note, I can add that, you know, a seller using one of those programs that's showing up as a cash buyer might be more apt to find a buyer of their home that is okay with a relocation contingency. Um,
That's a good
so
point.
that would be a great way to structure it.
Really good point. The other question we get right now in today's market is it just a good time to do this, right? Should I be, I think I saw in the chat, right, a question about, is it responsible to upgrade in today's market right now? Is this a good time to be doing such a thing?
Yeah, I get that question a lot too, especially with those looming 2 and 3% interest rates. Nobody wants to let them go, right? People are saying, "You're gonna have to roll me out of this house."
Well, let's talk about, I guess, the market, right? When we think about whether this makes sense or not, I feel like the market is a good thing to talk about when and so I've got some stuff I can share that might help us.
Just in general, I can add here the appreciation of homes in general year over year. Just in Middlesex County in New Jersey. If you're looking in other counties, it's going to vary, but just the average appreciation of homes is well exceeding the percentage of interest you're going to get in a savings account. When you're looking at it that way, maybe you're not upgrading to your dream home, but maybe it's upgrading to a stepping stone home that's going to help put you in that trajectory to get to the dream home because you're now taking advantage of appreciation instead of losing money by not capitalizing that in the bank.
That's perfect. And that's what you see up here, right? Is a chart that talks about exactly that.
Oh, that's
And
funny. I didn't
yeah,
even know that was coming.
we're on the same wavelength, right?
There we
So
go.
one of the concerns people have when they think, should I be upgrading or should I be buying a new home in a market like this is and especially when we have something to sell, is what's going on with home appreciations and what's going to happen, right? So this is a chart that shows all the big folks, Case-Shiller, FHFA, CoreLogic, Black Knight, Zillow, Redfin, right? And what they said actually happened in 2023, and the data is not fully here yet, but it shows that year over year, there's been growth in 2023. And this was a year when folks expected that there would be depreciation. And this is a national number, by the way, so it's not state specific, but this is a year when people expected initially, or some people thought that there would be depreciation, but here it shows that clearly there was appreciation. So that would suggest, and despite rising interest rates, this still happened. The other reason when we think about is it a good market to buy in is if we look at, this is a chart that shows the blue lines are household formations. So how many new households are being formed? And then the yellow bars show new home construction or completion. So how many new homes are being built? So you can see that if we look in the current time period, right? The blue bars as household formations is larger than the yellow bars of completions, which means that there are more people that need homes than that are being built. And if you take a look at this, right, it just shows that prior to 2008, when we looked at it, there were more homes that were being built than people that needed them. So when folks are like, well, are we going to see another bubble? Are we going to see another crash? Because we just talked about how home prices are appreciating. And people often think back to that 2008 time period, but you can see clearly here that at that time, there was just too many homes on the market. So and that's why one of the reasons that attributed to the crashes that happened there. And that's why the prices started coming down. But what we see here is that demand is likely to continue because there's just not enough homes being built for the number of people that are going to need homes. So this suggests that the market is not going to crash, as some folks think, right? Or or are expecting. The other thing is when we look at interest rates, right? This is a chart. The line graph shows interest rates, and the gray shaded areas shows recessions. Okay. And so what this shows is that every time there's been a recession, interest rates have come down right afterwards. And the reason I bring that up is because there's a lot of talk about a possible recession coming our way, right? And there's a whole lot more we can say about that, but at least when it comes to interest rates, what we can say is that mortgage rates come down historically. Every single one of these mortgage rates have come down following a recession. And so the statistics show that for every 1% the mortgage rates come down, 5 million more buyers come to the market. So if 5 million more buyers are coming to the market, and we just saw there's likely not that much more inventory coming to the market. What does that do to the market, right? To the buyers? Is it make it easier or harder for buyers to buy a home when there's that many more of them?
Oh my gosh, harder.
Harder, harder.
Yep.
So if we're thinking about, does this make sense to buy or to sell, right? And if we're going to want to do it eventually, right? If there's a reason why you're thinking about selling your home and buying a new one, maybe we're upgrading, maybe we're downgrading, whatever it may be, right? There's some reason why your personal situation makes you want to upgrade or downgrade or just buy a new home. And whatever those personal situations are, you know, the economy is going to do what the economy is going to do. And there's going to be a very finite window in which it feels like it's the right time to buy a home when we think about the macro economy. So we have to look at our personal economy and our personal situation and say, is the time right for us based on what's going on in our life? Because that window is going to, you know, change too. And you don't want to end up having regret because you can't control the market, but what you can control is your personal situation. So if your personal finances make it such that you can buy a home, these aren't reasons to let it stop you then if you can make it work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we're seeing also when we're thinking about is 2024, what's it going to look like? Does it make sense? There's the statistics show and the research shows that home affordability should increase in 2024 because inflation is trending downward. Mortgage rates are expected to decrease as a result of that. And incomes are increasing according to ADP and all these major surveys of that. So affordability should be increasing. The housing supply is expected to remain low because of what we just talked about lower, not enough new construction and higher household growth rates. And on top of that, rents are expected to remain elevated. So this doesn't apply to folks that are selling, but it does help for you to keep in mind when you think about, should you be making a move and what else is going on in the market? So just some things to watch out for when it comes to that.
So on that note, when it comes to deciding whether or not to sell or rent your current home, how do you go about deciding to do that? And if you don't have the down payment, can you take out equity from that home to rent it and then buy the next one? How does somebody make that decision?
Yeah, great question. So it starts with doing just a real thorough review. I would start with, first of all, of your personal situation, right? It's not a generic question that's going to be the same for everybody. It really will be a matter of how much equity do we have in the house? What do you qualify for? How much can we rent it for? So we'd have to look at all of those things and then look and see, is there enough equity for you to maybe draw out equity from that home for the down payment? What other options do we have for down payment? How much can we get in rent? Will we cover the rent on the mortgage? So we'd have to do a real thorough review of your personal situation to get a good answer to that question.
And that's one of the things and one of the reasons why I like referring you is because you will sit down and go through all of that data with the person so that they know and understand exactly the decision that they're making. So I think that's really important to note there because not every lender will do that. They'll say, hey, here's a pre-approval letter, have fun. And they'll have no idea what they're even bringing to closing or, what their payments look like. And it's a mess.
Yeah. And it's not really helping you out as a buyer, right? When something like that happens, unfortunately. So, and people end up making really bad decisions because they didn't have the right information. And that's what we want to try and collectively as a team, I know Claudia, Danielle, we all believe that the more information that you have as a buyer and a seller, the more informed a decision you can make, the better then more confident you'll feel and the less chance of you having any regret afterwards. Yeah. And, again, when we talk about buying and selling, right? Claudia, you started talking about home appreciation rates, right? And again, is it a good time to take advantage of that? Well, this is a chart that shows home appreciation rates from the 1942 all the way to 2023. And so you can see that there are, and we also have average mortgage rates here, by the way, right? Just for fun. And you can see that average mortgage rates went all the way up to 16% in 1982. Thankfully, I was not buying a home at that time, so I was lucky not to experience such rates, but many people did. And so, you can see that despite whatever was going on in the mortgage rates, for the most part, 74 years out of these 83 or so, there was positive home appreciation in the market, right? Only 1 year it was 0, and 7 years we had negative out of all of these years. So real estate is a good place to put your money. Basically, you get, consumption out of it as well as home appreciation for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a gambling person, but I like those odds.
Yeah, it doesn't, you don't have to be a gambler to take advantage of these odds. That's the fun part about it, right?
Yeah, I think it's better than the stock market, but I really wouldn't know. Like I said, not much of a
Yeah.
gambler.
What other questions do we have? If while you're under contract on your purchase, your buyer backs out on your sale?
Ooh.
Sounds like a Danielle
Danielle, take it
question.
away.
Yeah, so ordinarily, you go under contract. Ordinarily, when you're purchasing a contract with a sale contingency. So now you're the middleman, you're selling your home, you need to sell your home in order to buy a home. You go into attorney review. There's some parameters that are set forth. That's what attorney review is. It's ironing out the nitty-gritty details. Often the person whose home you're buying is going to have a clause that says, hey, if anything happens on the home that you're selling, if you lose your buyer, if they find an oil tank and there's contamination, if there's any delays, you need to let us know immediately. And there typically is a clause that says that if you lose your buyer midstream, the seller has the immediate right to cancel the contract. So losing a buyer while you're under contract to purchase a property is not a great, that's probably one of the worst situations that you can find yourself in.
Do you find that in some cases the seller of the property that they're buying will give them, because the market is still pretty competitive, will give them like a time frame in which they can get a new buyer under contract?
Sure, that's a viable option, a viable way to deal with it. It's not always that that seller is gonna, pull the rug out and cancel the deal. An extension is a perfectly good option, but it really just depends on, the dynamic of the situation. If that's a hot property and that seller has, an urgent need to move on by a deadline, or if, the deal was shaky from the start, they might be less inclined to give the extension, but giving an extension is always an option.
Another question here is, how bad does a contingent offer look to a seller? Claudia, I feel like that's maybe a you question.
It's going to depend on the house. If there's 6 offers and you are the only one with a contingency, the odds are stacked against you. But I just had a situation where my buyer was the only offer. So they did get their offer accepted without even having been on the market. Now, obviously, that's not recommended, but there's certain times people aren't quite ready emotionally to put their home on the market. And had this situation been different where they were competing against multiple offers, the likelihood of their offer getting accepted would have been a lot less. But since they were the only offer, because the home was already slightly overpriced, we're able to move forward. But it's really going to depend on the house. The way you can determine the likelihood of them accepting an offer with a contingency is if it's been on the market a while and there's no other offers, that's a good opportunity. But generally, there's a reason why a home has been on the market for a long time with no offers, and the number one culprit is it's overpriced. Aside from that, it would be a major noticeable defect like water in the basement or something of that nature. So it's going to depend on the house. It's going to be a case by case basis, but those are the things that I would look for if if my buyer was in that situation where they wanted to get an offer accepted with the contingency and they weren't further along in their transaction.
Helpful, thank you. Claudia, can you also maybe speak to what your recommendation is, right? If someone's looking to sell a house, and how do they start preparing and to buy that next one? What are some things that you recommend to help minimize disruptions and get that home ready to be put on the market?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on the person. If you have kids and pets, I'm going to recommend one thing to you versus if you only live there part-time. So more often it's people with kids and pets. So generally what we want to do is some initial preparation for the home. getting it cleaned, decluttering, starting to pack things away, depersonalizing it, and really getting it showcase ready. Once all of that is done, and there's things that, I'll be able to point out to you that, hey, you should spend money here, and no, don't bother, it's not worth it. We'll identify all of that, and then we'll go ahead and get it professionally photographed with some great videos and things to showcase your home on social media and other marketing platforms to make sure you really stand out against the competition and maximize your value there. Now, in terms of minimizing disruptions, in that same vein, maximizing your return, I always recommend to sellers in that situation where it's not so easy to show the home all the time, let's delay the showings until a grand open house event. There's a few reasons for this. One, it's going to create urgency. When buyers are walking past each other and they see, oh man, these people like it. Oh, these people like it. The buyer already has in the back of their head, I got to come in hot with this one. I can't come in at asking. It's going to be competitive. So for them to see their competition, I mean, think about it. When the boxer goes into fight, they're staring down their opponent. It creates that same energy. I mean, hopefully no fist fights, right? But it creates that same energy of, oh, I gotta be strong with this, creating that sense of urgency. And also, you won't have to pack up the car, pack up the kids, pack up the dog every time somebody wants to show the house. Because honestly, if you have a great listing that is priced well in a desirable neighborhood, there's a good chance you'll get 50 showings in the first couple days. So let's condense all of that, create that sense of urgency by having everybody come around within a couple hour window so that you don't have to go through all of the back and forth and stressing everybody out, and everybody's uncomfortable in the car. So it helps you twofold because now you're adding to that sense of urgency and you don't have to run around back and forth and all that stuff.
That's great. And the other great thing, Claudia, about you too, is that you do consult with your whole extended team that you have prior to even a listing, right? So I know sometimes we'll have a conversation about a listing before you put it on the market, say what's a great way to finance it for the potential buyer so you can get more people in the door that way. And are there, there's other strategies that we've talked about, like the seller buy down strategy, where you can maybe have that be a way to attract in more buyers into your market from a different pool. So that's really great that you leverage every resource that you possibly have to really set your sellers up for success in getting that quick sale.
Yeah, I mean, I try to coordinate with you to identify what programs that house is going to qualify for. Maybe if the home is not in so good shape, we can't market to FHA buyers because it's going to need
Right.
repairs up front. If the home is located in a USDA area, maybe that's an opportunity to attract low down payment buyers. Also, with mortgage assumptions, I try to consult with the seller to see, okay, is your current loan assumable? We want to make sure that we're attracting the perfect buyer for the house, and there's a lot of facets to it other than just, oh, is your kitchen and bathroom pretty? So this was a client I worked with recently. This was the property address of the home that they were selling, and then they ended up buying a upgraded home in Milltown. So they actually had the financial backing through some gift funds from mom and dad. So they were actually in a financial position to be able to purchase their new home first and then schedule the closing of their sale a couple weeks later to give them an opportunity to move into the new home. After we got through inspections on their purchase, we then went ahead and prepped their current home for sale. I made the recommendations of anything that should be repaired or color change. Sometimes people have some really personal taste when it comes to certain colors and decor in the house. So I gave recommendations on that, what would be most appealing to a buyer in their market. And then we went and got the home professionally photographed and videoed as well. In this case, they did have actually a bird, a dog, and a couple cats, and some kids, and two kids. So in this case, we did delay the showings until the open house. And at that open house, we also priced it very competitively for the area. So we had over 100 families, not people, 100 families at the open house. And this helped preventing them from having to pack up the car with the kids and the dog and go to mom's house. So that was really advantageous for them. With that open house, we yielded 26 written offers. Now, I include written in there because there were quite a few agents that called me and they asked me, "Hey, if I write an offer for this price, is that going to work?" And I would have to say, unfortunately, no, I have a higher offer. So I write written in there because I had verbals, but obviously they don't count, and obviously I didn't want to have that agent go through the effort of putting that in writing when we knew that it wasn't going to work out. So, of those 26 offers, they did accept something 94,000 above the asking price. And because they already had the new home to move into, it wasn't super important for them to have the use and occupancy or the relocation contingency because they were already very comfortable in their purchase. That was an awesome success story for them, and they're very happy in their new home now. Okay, so this was a little bit different of a situation. This client, this is the home that she sold. She wanted to get a larger home. She had a few adult sons living with her, and so she wanted to relocate to a larger home and an area closer to her work. So she needed to sell in order to buy. We didn't delay the showings here because most everybody was pretty much at work all day, so there really wouldn't be too much interference with their day to day because they were out of the house. So we let the showings continue, at the buyer's convenience. In this circumstance, we did receive multiple offers over asking. And actually, the highest one ended up being a cash offer with a free 30-day use and occupancy. So this enabled this client to close, have the money in hand before she finalized her purchase, and then she was able to start moving into the new home also. So that was good because she closed and then moved into the home and then she finalized the sale.
Nice job negotiating that. Really cool.
Yeah, she was really happy with it. It worked out. She wasn't homeless. So, I definitely never want somebody to be homeless, and it worked out. Everybody's happy in the end.
So it's kind of cool that you shared these because there's multiple ways that you can do this depending on your situation is really the big takeaway, right? Is that
Convenience. In this circumstance, we did receive multiple offers over asking. And actually, the highest one ended up being a cash offer with a free 30-day use and occupancy. So this enabled this client to close, have the money in hand before she finalized her purchase, and then she was able to start moving into the new home also. So that was good because she closed and then moved into the home and then she finalized the sale.
nice job negotiating that. Really cool.
Yeah, she was really happy with it. It worked out. She wasn't homeless. So, I definitely never want somebody to be homeless, and it worked out. Everybody's happy in the end.
So it's kind of cool that you shared these because there's multiple ways that you can do this depending on your situation is really the big takeaway, right? Is that it's not going to be the same for everybody. Everyone's going to have a different way that they get to their purchase and their sale at the same time if that's what they're looking to do. And really is just making sure they consult with some experts first to figure out what the right strategy is for them.
I agree. You need your dream team.
There you
need
go.
everybody to come together to put all the pieces together because there's different parts and different expertises within one transaction. So you need a little help from everybody.
For sure.
Absolutely. So there's a question here that says, what are the pros and cons of selling as is? Danielle?
I can certainly speak to that. So under the law, every transaction is as is. What as is means is that a seller has every right to decline repairs. So, my example is buyer can find asbestos and oil tank mold, radon, the worst things imaginable. And they go to the seller and they say, Mr. Seller, will you remediate these items? The seller is 100% within their right to refuse. There's no affirmative obligation on the part of the seller to do anything. The refusal, of course, would open the door then to the buyer having the right to cancel. So as is doesn't mean much. It may, at best, it is a seller's you get a glimpse of the seller's mindset that they don't want to really do repairs. But I can't imagine that, a seller wouldn't remediate mold or radon or asbestos or treat for termites. So it's a commonly misused term, I say. There's a very big difference between as is versus a waiver of inspections. If a seller may say as is, and what they really want is a waiver of inspections, meaning I can inspect, but I have no rights stemming from my inspection. So two very different concepts, not to be confused.
So in your experience, do you find that when the seller discloses up front, like, hey, as is, right? Do you find that those transactions, like the expectation is set, or do you find that buyers still try to negotiate later?
Yes, yes, a buyer will still try to negotiate. Very rarely do you get a buyer that says, the seller said as is, I'm not going to ask him to fix, an electrical defect or a, treat for termites. The buyer will always still ask. And most sellers are there are certain hot button items that sellers just understand. If that is found, they really should take care of it. So very few buyers do use that as is language as a justification for not asking for repairs, meaning they'll still ask.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think they feel the answer is no if you don't ask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How I was raised too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, there's a limit, right? You have to know which
Yeah,
battles to pick.
right.
Obviously, if, the inspection is relatively clean, but, it's a small, loose outlet, do you want to,
Right.
aggravate the seller over something like that? You got to pick
Yeah,
your battles.
absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Were there any other questions? I think
I think there was one more I saw come through.
okay, let me see.
Pros and cons of a
Oh,
fixer
I see
upper.
it. Okay. All right. So what are the pros and cons of a fixer upper?
Do you want me to start and then you can handle the financial aspect of it?
Yeah, let's do it that way.
Okay, so one of my favorite houses to recommend to my clients is grandma's house. And I say grandma's house because generally it'll have a lot of wood paneling, a lot of carpet, maybe some wallpaper, but I recommend this house because back in the day, the priorities were different, right? The priorities weren't the look of the house, it was the functionality of the house. So, grandma's most likely going to spend money on the roof, the HVAC equipment, and all those big ticket items that you don't want to spend because it's not the fun project. You don't get that immediate, wow, the kitchen looks so great because when you do the HVAC stuff, you're not going to be like, wow, look at that furnace. It's so shiny. It's not the fun stuff. So, I love grandma's house for my clients because it also gives them the opportunity to build equity in the house. Now, grandma's house is very different from buying a short sale or a foreclosure. In those situations, the person's losing their house. They don't have a penny to contribute to the home. So there's oftentimes a lot of deferred maintenance with those properties. Now, deferred maintenance means in addition to all those cosmetic projects you want to do, you have to replace the water heater, roof, furnace, air condenser, all of those non-glamorous projects too. And windows, even windows. So a lot of times people don't take that into consideration because the fun projects are the kitchen and bathrooms. They want the instant glamorification of the house. I generally don't love those homes for clients that don't have a lot of construction background experience or a family member or somebody to advise them on the full picture and scope of work that property is going to need. So yes, fixer uppers, I think, is a great opportunity for buyers, but it has to be the right fixer upper.
Yeah, that's great. So as far as what you do do you have the money to finance those homes, right? Because now you might say, well, I have the down payment money and closing costs, but I don't have the money to do the work. So what do we do in that situation? So in that situation, depending on what kind of down payment you're putting, and the answer will be different, by the way, if it's grandma's house or if it's the one that has the real issues on it, because we'll run into some other issues, but let's talk about if it's grandma's house first. So I like that one, Claudia. That was really good.
Thanks, yeah.
So if it's that type of home, then first of all, we would go back and look at your down payment, right? What kind of down payment were we putting? Do we have enough just to maybe put less down payment? That would be the easiest path, is let's put less money down and use the rest of the money for the financing. Keeps it super simple, keeps it most affordable, and you're have the least expense that way. If you need the money, then we do a renovation loan, and there's a couple different types of renovation loans. There's other expenses that come with renovation loans, and depending on if you're looking for renovation over a certain amount, usually about 35,000, then we need to get somebody called a HUD consultant involved, and it becomes a little bit more expensive. But that's renovation financing is available. And as I said, it takes longer because you have to get all your bids and everything up front. Whichever contractor you get your bid from is the one that you actually have to use. So we can't just get one and then think that we're going to shop contractors later. It doesn't work that way, which is a common thing. You can't do the work yourself. That's the other thing that a lot of folks say, that I'll get the money and I'll do it myself. We do need a licensed contractor to do the work when the bank is paying for the renovations. So that's something to keep in mind. And then specifically, if it becomes an issue of a home where it's a short sale or a foreclosure, and it's in this position where the property has a lot of things that are either structurally not there or concerns safety wise, then the bank may not want to lend on the house as is. So the financing is important too, because the house has to be safe and structurally sound in order for a bank to lend on it. And if not, then you are forced into a renovation loan, because that's how we can fix up the work and get the money to do so. And then the bank can give the money on it. And in that case, you need the renovation loan, even if you happen to have the money for it to do it yourself. So
That
just
makes
some other
sense.
things to keep sense there. Yeah.
Nice option too, if you absolutely love a house in a particular area, but maybe the move-in ready house is outside your budget right now, this is a great way to mend the fence on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And usually the sellers on those homes know that it's going to be that type. So they're usually more open to a longer closing turn time as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So if I'm selling my house, Danielle, this is a question here. When do I reach out to you as the attorney?
Short answer, at any time. So, I've got clients that reach out to me. They say, I'm listing. I haven't gotten an offer yet, but I'm listing and I want you to be my attorney. I have some some sellers retain me in that way. Others call me and say, we're on day 2 of attorney review and you need to jump in right now. So it runs the gamut. Ideally, enough time that makes you comfortable. I'm pretty comfortable jumping in, same day, within an hour if I need to. So there is no right answers in terms of that. Whatever makes the client more comfortable. If they want to be prepared, they want to get to know me a little bit before they actually send a contract to me, that's fine. If they want to, if they wait until the last minute and need to throw it at me to jump on, that's fine too as well. But on average, they'll call, hey, I've gotten an offer accepted. I'm signing contracts. A common question that I get is, do you need to see the contract before I sign it? I don't, because that is what attorney review is. Think of that contract as a fill in the blank form. Your agent fills in the blanks. You obviously want to make sure the purchase price is correct. Anything beyond there, we kind of have it from there. So I don't need to see contracts before they're signed.
That's a good one. I get that a lot too.
Yeah.
But also I want to add here, that's one of the things I love about working with you, is that you do recognize the sense of urgency, especially on the buyer side, because as we know, during attorney review, either party can cancel for any reason. So if the seller gets a better offer, we're out of the game. So that's definitely one thing and that's why I love working with you, is that the sense of urgency is there. You get it done. It's the buyer's or seller, the client's well informed of their options. Any red flags, you let them know right away, and you're available to speak with them and validate their concerns and answer their questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, some sellers may say to me, hold review. I've got additional showings. It's a common thing that we'd see, you know, when 2 years ago, when if you weren't under contract by 5 o'clock on a Friday, you were probably losing the deal over the weekend, you know. But sellers would tell me, you know, we got a review letter, you know, drag it out, give it some time, and then they most likely get a better offer by Monday morning. So it's strategic, you know. You need to, you know, just pay attention to the client's needs, whether they want to get under contract immediately or extend the process in hopes of a different offer.
Yeah, that's such a bummer when that happens because, you know, you're all excited. Congrats, your offer's accepted, and then womp womp. So, is there anything a buyer can do to prevent that from happening?
I have an
Just
attorney that responds very quickly.
yes, definitely.
You know, I've got a client right now that I'm on like my third phone call to her, and she's a buyer, and she just had to do a highest and best, and you know, I'm still waiting to hear back from her. Um, you know, it's, you know, we need to move as quickly as possible, and you know, appreciate the urgency, because one of the things that I find is a surprise to either buyers or sellers is that while you're in attorney review, the adverse party can pull the deal for any reason, good reason, bad reason, no reason. So you're in a very vulnerable position until you get that under contract email.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you said it, Danielle, it really, really makes a difference who you work with.
Absolutely.
There's two things, right, that I took away from what you said. One, it really makes a difference to have the right team and the right people involved as you're buying and selling a home. And number two, for you to make it a priority as the buyer and the seller, right? Because I know a lot of times people say, I'll get to it because work is more important, or I have to go do this and that. But if you are serious about buying or selling a home, you do have to make it a priority and respond quickly so that you can get the best deal and the best home and the best things that you want out of what, you know, in the situation.
Certainly. And, you know, I'll instruct my buyers as well, you know, work with your lender as quickly as possible. Don't sit on a request for documents or information, you know, that came over at 5 a.m. Don't wait until 7 p.m. to do it, you know, because you're not going to close in a timely manner. So, you know, when they say, what's next, I say, work hand in hand with your lender to respond as quickly as possible in order to hit that mortgage commitment date, which is typically about 30 days out, sometimes sooner.
Yeah. And the sooner you can make it, sometimes the better you can look to a prospective seller. So that's why we try to do like the pre-underwriting and things like that, so they can have more flexibility, right? The more you can set yourself up when you're on the buying side, because we are in a seller's market. So the more you can do, the more competitive advantages you can give yourself to have an offer accepted, the better off you're going to be.
Sure. One of my favorite things to say is, when presenting inspection requests, to the extent we can satisfy the inspections, we already have a mortgage commitment. And that's a beautiful thing when you can say that, because they know that, you know, one contingency is down. It's just a matter of meeting eye to eye on inspection items, which is a great position to be in.
Pinky, did you want to share more about what it means to get pre-underwritten? I don't know that people are super familiar with that.
Oh, sure. So typically there's a couple different terms that people are familiar with: pre-qualified and pre-approved. What it really means is pre-qualified means that someone has hopefully done a hard pull on your credit, not a soft pull, but I know there's some of that out there as well. And they've, based on your verbal presentation of your income and your assets, made a determination of what you qualify for. That's a pre-qualification. A pre-approval is you've submitted paperwork and a lender has reviewed your income, your assets, and your other documentation that goes along to support your, you know, your qualifications. And a lender, being a loan officer like myself, is who usually reviews that. And normally what happens in the process is that once you have an offer accepted and you have a contract, at that point, your loan goes into underwriting. Underwriting the people that make the final decision on whether to give you the money or not. So we really need what they have to say is super important. So what we can do is, instead of waiting until you have an offer accepted, sending it to underwriting before that point. And when we do it before that point, then we clear up all the things that we possibly need to. And what that does is now when you present yourself to the seller, you come across as a super motivated, super strong buyer with that mortgage contingency already met. So in the spirit of what Danielle just said, we've already got a contingency met there, so we don't have to worry about that. And now if it's important to the seller to close quick, well, we can do so because we've got some of the work we would have had to do done earlier. And Danielle, you just said it normally takes 30 days. Well, we've got it on day 0. So now the seller is in a much better position to feel confident in you and to know that you can close quick. So it gives you a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah. So, does that cost anything to do that up front?
Good question. It does cost us as a lender a whole lot of money because we're putting our processors and our underwriters and we're employing all these people. So it costs us a lot of money, but we personally, we do not charge our clients anything to do that. Yeah, we do have a couple of requests of them. One, that they're serious about buying a house because it only lasts for a certain amount of time. 2, that whenever we ask for paperwork, they turn it around within 24 to 48 hours because we are committing to super aggressive timelines on their behalf and we can't do it without their cooperation. And lastly, that they do want to work with us all the way through closing as we're investing all these resources to help them win.
Wow, that's really awesome added benefit. It doesn't cost them anything and they have to do it anyway. So why not do it up front and get your probability of getting your offer accepted higher?
Yeah. And honestly, when you find a house, there's a lot going on and you have to do a lot of things. You have to, work with Danielle, do attorney review. You have to deal with the inspection. So it also makes the process a lot easier if you have one less thing that you have to worry about in that stage once you actually find a house.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't think there's any other questions. We can
Yeah.
go
I don't
ahead
see any
and
others.
wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming. We're really
Thank
excited
you.
that you were able to join us today for unlocking your upgrade. And if you have any questions, we will give you all of our contact information and you can reach out to us personally and we'll help connect the dots for you.